We will be recording tonight's webinar, so we'll share the recording as well as the PowerPoint slides with you tomorrow. You'll get an email from me. And if you have any questions or comments, please type those in the Q&A. I'll be answering questions behind the scenes as well as shouting out some of the questions that I think everybody could benefit from to our guest speaker. So with that, I want to introduce our guest speaker, Apelila Joseph, and she is going to tell you a little bit more about herself.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So my name is Apelila Joseph. I'm the Springfield Promise Administrator. I work for Springfield Public Schools out in the western part of the state. So I oversee the district's team of high school-based financial aid advisors, and we work with seniors and their families every year, guiding them through the FAFSA process, CSS profiles, supporting students and families with things like scholarships, reviewing award letters, so all things money in college. So I'm very excited to be here tonight.
Thank you for joining us. And just before I get it on to the next slide, a little bit about MEFA. We are a nonprofit quasi-state authority. We've been around since 1982, helping families plan, save, and pay for college. One of the greatest things we do at MEFA are these college financing seminars. Of course, we're all virtual the last 2 falls because of the pandemic. But we are looking forward to having you here tonight. So we will answer your questions. So I'm going to turn it over to our speaker to get started.
Thank you. So tonight we are going to go over things and learn a little bit about the different types and sources of financial aid. We will review the financial aid application process. We are going to understand how financial aid decisions are made. You guys will learn about paying for college and what that might look like and the different pathways to do that. And then we'll just review some free resources that are available for families. So what is financial aid? So financial aid really is made up of 3 things. Grants and scholarships or gift aid. I always tell my students that's free money. That's money that you do not have to pay back. Federal work study, which many of my students are always like, what's work study? Like, how does that work? And so that is just financial aid that goes to fund an on-campus job for students. And then of course, federal student loans, which for many families that is, a scary word and a scary part of the process, but it can ultimately be an investment in your child's future. So financial aid really is money to help students pay for college.
Great, and just let me know when you need me to advance the slides.
Go right ahead in advance. Thank you. So there are different sources of financial aid. There is federal financial aid, and those are things like the federal Pell Grant, work study, federal student loans. There are various tax incentives. And so for all things related to federal financial aid, you can go to studentaid.gov. With financial aid, there's also aid from the state. So within Massachusetts, there are things called like the Mass State Grant. There are different scholarships, tuition waivers. So things like the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, tuition waivers for students in foster care or DCF custody. So you can visit mass.edu/OSFA for more information on financial aid from the state of Massachusetts. And then of course, colleges and universities provide grants, scholarships, and even loans sometimes. And those are that all is called institutional aid. And then finally, there are other agencies. So scholarships, and that's a huge thing, especially right now when you're thinking about how to pay for college, aside from just applying for financial aid through like the FAFSA. There are tons of different organizations out there that provide scholarships. And so you can search for scholarships using MEFA Pathway or FastWeb. There are tons of different online sites. And I always tell my students, pick at least one site, make a profile on that site. So that way you're getting customized scholarships that'll fit your profile. Then also connect with your school counselor. And I can speak from experience working in Springfield Public Schools. We get tons of scholarships sent to the guidance office at various times throughout the school year. Depending on your school, maybe they post it on the website or in something like Naviance, depending if your school uses that. But it's always great to connect with the school counselor to see what local scholarships might be available and where they might be posted for your child to apply for. Next slide, please. So that federal direct student loans. So with this, and I always think it's an important distinction, as I'm working with families and, we're filling out the FAFSA, one question I often get from parents is, does this mean I'm going to have to take out a student loan? No, it does not. So by completing the FAFSA, your child could become eligible for a federal direct student loan. That loan is totally in your child's name. It has nothing to do with you as the parent. It won't impact your credit or anything like that. The student is the sole borrower. There's no credit check. Federal direct loans can be subsidized, meaning you're not responsible for the interest while you're in school, or they can be unsubsidized, meaning as soon as you take out money, the interest will begin accruing immediately. It's a fixed interest rate. So for this current school year, the 2021-2022 school year, the interest rate is at 3.73%. And then repayment, because it is a federal direct loan, there are no payments due while your child is enrolled in college. There are multiple options for repayment. And this is something that I always highlight to students, depending on their career field. Maybe they want to go on to become a teacher or work in some sort of public service field. There are tons of options for repayment, which make some of these federal direct student loans a really great investment for your child. The total amount borrowed over 4 years comes out to about $27,000 max. And so to give you a better idea, every year, your federal direct loan amount goes up. So for your child's freshman year of college, they can only take out $5,500 in the federal student loans. For their sophomore year, it goes up to $6,500. And then for junior and senior year, it goes up to $7,500. You do not have to take out that full loan amount for that year. You can reduce the loan amount that you're choosing to take out. I always tell my students, only borrow what you need. So oftentimes, students might get a refund check, which is great, but if your refund check is all loan money, ultimately you're going to have to pay that back. So I always tell students, if you can reduce your loan amount in any way, that's exactly what you'll want to do. The estimated repayment, your monthly amount over 10 years once you graduate will be right around $300. So your estimated total debt, so thinking about the overall interest that you're going to end up paying on the loan, will be right around $32,000 to $34,000. And so with federal direct student loans, there's deferment, forbearance, loan forgiveness opportunities. Like look at us right now, we're in a global pandemic. You do not have to pay on your federal direct loans right now, which is a great perk, versus if you were to take out a private loan, you would still be responsible for making those payments. So I always tell students, loans can definitely be a scary and intimidating process, but it's definitely an investment in yourself and in your future. And something like, if you want to go down this path, we just want to take some time to make sure we're borrowing responsibly. Next slide, please. So merit-based aid. And this is something that, with all of my students, especially my high achieving students, they're like, what sort of merit-based aid is out there? So merit-based aid is awarded in recognition of student achievements. This can be academic excellence. So your students with high GPAs, artistic ability, athletic ability. There might be renewable options and requirements to keep merit-based aid. So a lot of times, like if you're a stellar student in high school, you might be awarded merit-based aid in your financial aid package. In order to keep those merit-based scholarships, you might have to maintain a certain GPA when you're in college. It's not offered at every college. So you really want to check the college's website for additional details. And a lot of colleges will list like what their big like merit-based presidential scholarships are and things on the website. So you can do a little bit more research to see what that might look like for your child. It's a separate application sometimes. It varies by the college. So you really want to check deadlines. Sometimes if you apply to a college by a certain date, you'll automatically be considered for that merit-based scholarship. So you really want to do your research depending on the college. Sometimes there's an application deadline as early as November. Again, you want to do the research depending on the specific college to make sure that you are applying in time to be considered. Next slide, please. Need-based aid. So need-based aid is based on a family's financial eligibility, hence the term need. Eligibility is determined by a standardized formula, and it includes things like grants, loans, and work study. Most financial aid is need-based, and you must be making satisfactory academic progress. So as a student, you have to maintain a satisfactory GPA, meaning you're not like flunking out, in order to maintain your need-based aid. Next slide, please. So we are going to get into the financial aid application process. So looking at the financial aid timeline, it is super important, and I cannot stress this enough, to be aware of deadlines and the required applications on each college's website. Now is the perfect time. FAFSA just opened on October 1st, just a couple weeks ago. Now is a really good time to get caught up and see what your college's financial aid deadlines might be. For students who are applying early action or early decision, there are often deadlines late October, early November. I'm going through it with my students right now. We actually just met after school today, and some of our students have that November 1st deadline included for their financial aid. So it's really important, in order to get the most aid possible for your child, you are not late on those deadlines. You should never submit your financial aid application late, because if you submit it past the deadline, you're not going to be included in that priority filing. And so you could potentially miss out on financial aid. MEFA has a college application manager that can help you stay organized. That's definitely a great resource to check out and incorporate. The more you can do now to organize, there's tons of like deadlines and things that students are juggling right now, just going through the college process. You have the college application deadline, then you have the different financial aid deadlines. They might need the FAFSA, the CSS Profile, an institutional form. So in order, you want to find a way to stay organized and stay on top of the deadlines. Next slide, please. So FAFSA. The FAFSA, can we just go forward one more? Perfect. The FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, emphasis on the free. So it is required by all colleges. So no matter what school your child is planning on attending, you have to complete the FAFSA. If you're going to a 2-year, 4-year, maybe you're looking at a certificate program, when in doubt, just do your FAFSA. FAFSA opens on October 1st of each year. You can also complete the FAFSA on a mobile device. So Federal Student Aid has the My Student Aid mobile app, which is another way to complete the FAFSA. If you don't have access to like a computer, you can totally do it on your smartphone. And when completing your FAFSA, in order to log in, you will need what's called an FSA ID. And so you can complete that online. Both the student and the parent will need to create an FSA ID. And so a little bit about the FSA ID. It acts as your electronic signature. It's a username and a password that the student will use to log into the FAFSA. Parents, it'll act as your electronic signature when you're signing it. You'll need that in order to electronically retrieve your taxes using the IRS data retrieval tool, which makes completing the FAFSA nice and easy, because it's just pulling in your federal tax data from the IRS and just inputting it directly into the FAFSA. It totally saves tons of time when you're doing the FAFSA. And then MEFA, of course, has access to a FAFSA webinar if you have questions or need a little bit of a refresher. And it's important to note that the FAFSA must be completed every single year. So you don't just complete it as a senior in high school. Every year that your student will be in college, you'll need to renew your FAFSA in order to be eligible for financial aid. And so I do want to just emphasize again, FAFSA is free. Complete it on FAFSA.gov. Don't go to FAFSA.com. Don't go to FAFSA.org. You should never pay for your FAFSA. There are tons of free resources available to you to support you in completing the FAFSA if you have any questions. Next slide, please. So what's reported on the FAFSA? So general information, things like a student's citizenship status. If for parents who might not be US citizens, but your child is a citizen, you can still be listed on the FAFSA. You would just put in zeros for the social security number, and we would print a signature page. In order to create an FSA ID, you have to have a social security number. So you cannot complete FAFSA as a student without having a social security number. But for parents who might not have a social security number, we can still do the FAFSA for your student if they are a citizen. Colleges, when you're completing the FAFSA, you'll need to know the colleges that the student is applying to. On the FAFSA, you can only list 10 colleges at a time. So if, like many of my students who are eager beavers, your child has a list of 15 or 20 schools that they're applying to, I would say submit the FAFSA with your top 10 colleges first. And that might be colleges where you have early action or early decision deadlines. We can go back in after your FAFSA processes and add the additional colleges that your child might be applying to. Parents, of course, are listed on the FAFSA. So parents who are married, including same-sex parents, all parents who live together, whether you're married or not, parents who are divorced or separated, the custodial parent will be listed on the FAFSA. And if that parent has, remarried, their current spouse will also be listed on the FAFSA. Legal guardians are not considered a parent on the FAFSA. And so therefore, if a student has a legal guardian, they would be listed as independent. And I think it's important to call out right here as well. When figuring out which parent to list on the FAFSA, it does not go by which parent claimed the student on the tax return. It goes by which parent the student lives with the majority of the year. The FAFSA also takes into account the number in the household and the number of children who are in college. So for some families where, and I'll use my family as an example, I had twin brothers who graduated just before me and then me. So my parents had 3 of us in college at one time, which is great when you're applying for financial aid because there's more need there. So what's reported on the FAFSA? On the FAFSA, you're going to report financial information. So FAFSA is looking for both student and parent income for 2020. And I think it's important to call out that students should be completing the 2022-2023 FAFSA. And it's funny because I just talked about this with one of my financial aid advisors. You're doing the 2022-2023 FAFSA because that's the year that your child will be in college. So when in doubt, just think to the fall. Oh, that's right. They're going to college in fall of 2022. And that's the 2022-2023 school year. With that financial information, we're looking for both taxed and untaxed income. The FAFSA also looks for parent and student assets. So these are things like the amounts that you have in your savings account, your checking account. If you have any investments or other properties, not the home that you live in, but other investments and properties, that all will be included on the FAFSA. You want to include all 529 accounts as a parent asset and not as a student asset. And again, don't include your primary home, the value of your retirement, life insurance, or the value of a small family business. And then debt is not reported on the FAFSA except for debt on reported assets. Next slide, please. So other financial aid applications. Some colleges will require what's called the CSS Profile. And again, this varies by colleges. When you think about the big name schools, like Ivy League schools, they tend to require the CSS Profile. I will tell you, it is both similar to the FAFSA and different from the FAFSA. It's similar to the FAFSA in terms of the types of information that they're asking. They're looking for income information, the colleges that your student is applying to, listing parents, listing the student on the FAFSA, but it's also different from the FAFSA because it asks a lot more in-depth questions. So again, it's required by some colleges and universities. You can visit cssprofile.org, and right on the website, you can click in to see the list of colleges that require the CSS profile. Most colleges will list it right on their financial aid website, whether or not the CSS profile is required, but you can go to the actual CSS profile and view the list of schools that require it as well. Unlike the FAFSA, the CSS profile is not free. It is $25 to send the profile to the first school and then $16 for each additional school. The profile does have fee waivers if the parent income is $100,000 or less, or the family meets certain other criteria. The CSS profile becomes available on October 1st. Unlike the FAFSA, the CSS profile, the college might require a non-custodial parent to also submit a separate profile. And that again will vary depending on the college. So it's really important to do some homework on the colleges that you're applying to. If you're applying to several schools that require the profile, some of them might require a non-custodial parent profile as well. So you want to double check your college's website, or again, there's the list available right on the CSS profile website. And on there, they will tell you if the college requires the non-custodial profile. A college may waive the non-custodial requirement. And this is something that I've done with my students several different times. So if you have any special circumstances related to the non-custodial parent, you can certainly reach out to the college and submit a waiver form for them to consider waiving that non-custodial profile requirement. And MEFA does have a webinar recording on the CSS profile. I would say for anyone attempting to fill out the profile on your own, it doesn't hurt to just view a recording and brush up a little bit, because it is a bit longer than the FAFSA, and some of the questions can be a little tricky. And again, it's a college financial aid application that is required by some colleges and universities. So you really want to double check with your college to see if it is a requirement. And again, for any students who are applying early action or early decision, you want to double check your deadlines, because you might have a CSS profile deadline of early in November, and you want to make sure that you get those done as well on time. So what happens after you apply? After you complete the financial aid forms, and I'll use the FAFSA as an example, colleges in the state, so in our case, it's Massachusetts, will receive the data electronically. The student will receive a student aid report. Typically, it's available like by email. You'll get an email a couple of days after you submit your FAFSA saying that your student aid report is available. If you have any special circumstances, so we've been going through a global pandemic for the last year and a half. If your income might be different now than what was reported on your 2020 taxes, you should be reaching out to the financial aid office at this point. After you've submitted the FAFSA, you've gotten your student aid report back, you can reach out to the financial aid office to report any special circumstances, any changes in income or changes in employment that would not come up on the FAFSA just based off of the information that the FAFSA was requesting. This is also the point where colleges may request verification documents. So verification is a random process. It's essentially colleges looking to make sure that the information you reported on your FAFSA is in fact true. So they might request things like a verification worksheet for a dependent student, where they're looking to know like who's in your household. And then beyond that, requesting things like a tax return transcript or a signed tax return, just to verify the income information that you put on the FAFSA. Your financial aid application is incomplete until you submit your verification documents. So if you are like some of my students and you're applying to, a bunch of colleges, this is where you really want to get organized. As you're completing financial aid applications, you want to check to see like, were you selected for verification? When you check your student aid report, oftentimes it'll tell you if you were selected for federal verification, so that way you can begin prepping what documents you might need to submit. Colleges will review your financial aid applications and determine a financial aid offer and send that out to you. Next slide, please. So a little bit more on verification. Colleges verify data on financial aid applications. So you can be selected by the Department of Education or by the college specifically for verification. And so I'll be honest, verification can really happen at any point after you submit your FAFSA. I've had students who have been selected for verification later in the spring, just around like who's in their household or, changes with their family's income. You must comply with requests to receive financial aid. So again, your financial aid application will be considered incomplete until you submit the verification documents. And I will tell you, there is oftentimes a timeline on submitting verification documents. If you wait and do not submit the documents in a timely manner, you could miss out potentially on some financial aid. Oftentimes, families are asked to submit their tax return, a verification worksheet, asset account statements. So you really want to review all correspondence from colleges. Sometimes colleges will send you a letter in the mail with like a verification worksheet. Other times they'll send your child an email saying, hey, you have some to-dos in your college portal. We need you to log in. So it's really important to pay attention to all correspondence from colleges as we move throughout the senior year to make sure that we're not missing anything. So log into those college web portals regularly, check for communications, check those to-dos. When in doubt, if you are, you haven't really heard from any of the colleges, you're not really sure what's happening, it does not hurt to call them or send them an email. You just want to check in, make sure you didn't miss anything, so that way you're staying on top of things. And I will say college financial aid offices are always happy to connect with students and parents, explain the process. If you have any questions, they're also there as a resource and to help you. Next slide, please. So the financial aid office, you can learn about your financial aid. So financial aid renewal criteria, whether it is financial or whether it is academic, the treatment of private scholarships, this is so important. I have students all senior year and they're like, I'm gonna get in a good groove and apply to scholarships. I'm gonna apply to a couple every month. So that way, I'm just kind of chipping away as we move throughout the year. But then they pick a college that practice something called displacement. So they worked all year to get all this great scholarship money, but the college that they pick, because they receive so much scholarship money, starts to take away some of the merit aid that they awarded the student. So this is an instance of displacement. So it's really important before you even decide on a college, you reach out to the financial aid office and find out how they treat private scholarships. Is a college going to take away any money that they're giving your student because your student is coming in with a lot of outside scholarship money? And also, how will changes to the FAFSA in 2024, 2025 affect your financial aid? When we think about college, especially if your student is pursuing their bachelor's degree or looking even to go and get a master's or beyond that, you want to think about college not just in terms of the first year, but in terms of 4 years. If you're going to pursue your master's degree, 5 to 6 years. So that way you're starting and you're finishing college and you're doing it in a way that financially is going to be responsible for you and your family. Ask about special considerations. So reach out to the financial aid office if there are changes in family circumstances. This could be changes in employment, changes in family size and who you might be caring for, in part because of the pandemic. If you have a question, it does not hurt to reach out to the financial aid office. Can I appeal my offer, and how do I do that? You certainly can. You can reach out to a college's financial aid office after you receive that financial aid offer, and you can ask for more money. Maybe there's a change in your finances that wasn't reported on the FAFSA, and what the college offered you is just not going to work for you and your family. You can absolutely reach out to the college, explain, hey, I'm caring for my older parents now as well. Our family financial circumstances have changed from what was reported on the FAFSA. And so that's something you can certainly reach out to a financial aid office about. And so lastly, how do you contact the financial aid office? You can give them a call. You can also send them an email, or some colleges will also offer like a chat feature on their website. I say when in doubt, it doesn't hurt to do a phone call. A lot of financial aid offices will allow you to like plan and set aside a time, especially if you want to like go over the financial aid offer with them, ask any questions, ask about how aid might be awarded for subsequent years. It's a great time to connect with the financial aid office. Next slide, please.
Okay, I think we're just going to take a quick break before we keep moving, just to answer a few questions live, if you don't mind. We have some good ones that I think everybody could benefit from. So are the federal loans, those federal direct student loans that we talked about earlier, are they based on financial need, or, you know, for families who might have a high EFC that don't qualify for the subsidy, can the student still get the federal direct student loan?
So you can still get the federal direct student loan. If you have like a high EFC, there's not like a large financial need, you can still qualify for an unsubsidized direct student loan.
Great. So the subsidy is based on financial need, but if you don't have that financial need, the entire loan or part of it would be unsubsidized. Great. Okay. And then is Merit Aid something the students need to apply directly to the college for that, or are they automatically considered as part of the overall admissions application?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So largely for most colleges, it's something that they're going to automatically consider just based on looking at your child's high school transcript and seeing those grades and things. I think like academic achievement largely is like the most common form of Merit Aid. Depending on the college and the level of sports involvement, you might see some there as well. Some colleges, like if it's Merit Aid for like art, your student might have to submit like a portfolio. So depending on the type of Merit Aid, you might have to submit additional items. And again, that'll vary by the college. Obviously, if you're going to an art school, most art schools require a portfolio. So they'll consider that as a part of the entire application process. But I will say some colleges offer additional merit scholarships, and those scholarships often mean applying to the college by a certain deadline in order to be considered for that scholarship. So largely colleges are going to just consider you for Merit Aid based off of your college application and, you know, your grades and everything that you're putting into it. But sometimes there are additional merit scholarships that you have to pay attention to and apply for by a certain specific deadline.
Excellent, thank you. And one more before we keep moving on. And for those folks who are typing in questions, I am answering them fast and furiously. So hold tight, but we do get this question a lot. So I wanted to make sure we clarified. When parents are divorced or separated and they split custody 50-50, who should fill out the FAFSA form?
Oh, this is a common question. So if they split custody 50-50, who I would say who provides most of the financial support for the student at that point? A lot of FAFSA is really looking initially at like who the child lives with more throughout the year. So even if you like split 50-50, but maybe, you know, like just during like the regular school week, the child is with mom more than they're with dad, then I would put mom on the FAFSA.
Great, thank you. Okay, we can keep going and I'll keep answering questions behind the scenes.
So how are financial aid decisions made? And if you could just pop over to the next slide.
Yeah, it should be on the cost of attendance slide. That's what I'm seeing on my end. Sometimes there's a delay when I.
Maybe I have a delay then.
It shouldn't be this long of a delay though. What? Are you still showing the cost of attendance? Okay, great.
I see cost of attendance now. Excellent. So Cost of attendance. So cost of attendance is the total expenses for 1 year of college. And so cost of attendance takes into things like direct costs. So these are things that a college can bill a family for. That's things like tuition and fees, room and board. Cost of attendance also takes into account indirect costs. And so these are things that aren't billed directly by a college. So books and supplies, we know, when our students start college in the fall, they will have to purchase books. They might have to have notebooks, a laptop, different supplies and things. And those are things that a family really should budget for as they're thinking about what college to attend, as well as transportation. So if you are commuting back and forth to a school, if you're going to go to school a little bit farther away from home, and you might have to, get back home for breaks and things, as well as personal expenses. And these are just, basic, daily living expenses that your child might have while they're in school. And so all of that encompasses the cost of attendance. Next slide, please. So the expected family contribution, or the EFC. And so that is the amount a family has the ability to absorb for 1 year of college costs. So it's the same federal formula used for every family. So when you complete your FAFSA, immediately it'll tell you what your estimated expected family contribution is. The family has the primary responsibility for paying it. It's not necessarily what the family will pay. A lot of times it's used in conjunction with other things, which we'll get to on the next slide. And it's lowered if a family has more than one child in college. So I'll use my family as an example. When I went to college, I already had two brothers who were in college. So my parents had 3 kids in college at one time. So our overall EFC was lower when I went to college because now there were 3 of us in school. And so MEFA does have an EFC calculator. You can also, like if you haven't yet, you want to get your FAFSA done early, you can get your FAFSA done and see what your expected family contribution will be. Next slide, please. So the financial aid formula. So we take the cost of attendance, and remember that is things like tuition and fees, room and board, those indirect costs, so transportation, books and supplies, personal expenses, and we subtract the expected family contribution, and we get your financial aid eligibility. So colleges will fill in the financial aid eligibility with financial aid from all sources. And remember, different sources of financial aid are things like scholarships and grants, loans, work study. Next slide, please. So financial aid awarding. So if we had a cost of attendance of $45,000 and we had an EFC of $5,000, we're going to subtract that $45,000 and $5,000 from the $45,000. And so colleges are going to begin filling in with different sources of financial aid. So you'll get a scholarship for $10,000, a grant for $17,500. They threw in student loans for $5,500, and then you had $2,000 of work study. And so essentially what they're trying to do is fill this up with different sources of financial aid. Next slide, please. Oh, I didn't even realize there was another one. And then of course, a family might be responsible. So every college awards differently. There are some schools who meet what's called full need. And then there are some schools who will meet a percentage of a family's demonstrated need. So a family is responsible for the unmet need that a college does not meet. And so that oftentimes that's that little bit of money that's left over that financial aid does not cover, and you have to find other sources to help cover that. Colleges have net price calculators on their website. And so this is a great tool for families who have, questions about what it might cost to attend that specific college. So you can go to any of your college's websites and use their net price calculator. It'll ask questions about family finances, student academics. They're really trying to give you a good estimate of what you would end up having to pay. It provides a personal estimated net college price. It displays federal and institutional aid, and merit-based aid may also be included. So net price calculators are a great resource for families who are trying to plan ahead now to figure out, like, as we're, building out our college list and applying to these colleges, we also want to see on the financial side how these schools will stack up and if there's somewhere that we can afford to send our child. Next slide, please. So financial aid offer, the totals can vary. So there is no one size fits all when it comes to financial aid offers. A cost of attendance could be $45,000. You have an EFC of $5,000. Your total eligibility is going to be $40,000. Again, colleges vary in terms of their awarding. Some colleges will meet your full demonstrated need. Other colleges will meet just a percentage of that need. So the total amount of financial aid that you're being offered will vary depending on, and for lack of a better way to say it, how deep a college's pockets run. So it can totally vary. You can have college A where, there's zero unmet need, all the way to college C where a family has to come up with, $15,000 out of pocket to cover that unmet need. And so this is something where I will say it's really important to take time to review all of your financial aid offers. Your offers are going to vary by school. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. So you really want to review each offer to make sure that you're making the most informed decision for your family. And it's something that your child and your family can afford, not just for the first year of college, but to complete college all the way to a degree, whether it's an associate's, bachelor's, master's, whatever the long-term overall career plan might be. And so the types of financial aid and a financial aid offer can vary as well. So some colleges will include things like parent loans. You might get a financial aid offer and right on it, like College C, it lists a Parent Plus loan for $29,500. If I saw that on my son's financial aid offer, I would say, oh I don't know what parent they're talking about because I'm not taking that out. So it's really important to review all of your financial aid offers to see first and foremost what a college is offering. So College A, what they're offering is very different than what College C is offering. Even though the unmet need is the same across the board, College A, they're not offering a parent loan. It's the standard student loan for $5,500. They gave a great amount of grants and scholarships. There's work study in there. So College A, as a parent, if I'm viewing that looks like something that's more workable for us versus College C, where there's no grants and scholarships, and they're expecting me as a parent to take out almost a $30,000 loan to cover my child's college. So it's really important to take a look at what's actually listed in the financial aid offer. Next slide, please. Paying for college. So filling the EFC and unmet need. So if you have a balance due, let's say in this case, it's $20,000. How do we fill that unmet need? So one way is utilizing savings. So maybe your child works every summer. When I was in high school, I worked at the YMCA's summer camp. So maybe your child has $1,000 in savings. You as a parent, you've been putting money under your mattress, saving up for college. So you have about $4,000 in savings to put towards school. You can also choose to do, so that right there is $5,000. You can also say, you know what, we have a little bit of extra money every month. Why don't we enroll in a payment plan? So we'll pay $5,000 over the course of the school year and a payment plan. So if you enroll in a 10-month payment plan, you're paying $500 every month. And then there's such thing as future income. So taking out an additional education loan. And so oftentimes for some families, this is another option, depending on your family's financial circumstances, looking at the larger picture in terms of your child's career goals, it might make sense to take out an additional education loan. And so in this example, they're choosing to take out a $10,000 education loan to help cover that $20,000 unmet need gap. Next slide. So there's some important kitchen table conversations that have to happen, especially if you're looking at like a $20,000 gap. Could starting off at a community college save money? And for many students, absolutely, that's a great way to save money and still complete your ultimate like career goal and your career and education goals. You also want to think about the number of children you will send to college. I'll use my family as an example. There's 4 of us. 3 of us were in college immediately at once. There was a time when all 4 of us were in college at once, and that wasn't fun for my parents. But you want to think about long-term, like if you have, children who are back-to-back, they'll be going to college all at once. When you're deciding on college for your first child, you want to think about not just for them, but for the ones who are coming up underneath them. Think in terms of total enrollment, 4 or more years and the total debt. So again, if you're looking at your associates or your bachelor's or your child is looking to do a master's, you want to think about college in terms of how long they're going to have to go to school and the total amount of debt they'll have when they graduate. You want to calculate the post-graduation monthly loan payment. So in our earlier slides, we looked at, taking out that direct federal student loan. You would graduate with about $27,000 of student loan debt, and your repayment each month would be about $300. If you are a student going to school for like computer science, engineering, really any of the STEM majors, that's a great investment in yourself. You're going to come out, you'll have, a great job, and you'll be able to afford to pay that back each month. So you want to think about college and your student loan debt in terms of, your post-graduation salary and what you might have to pay back each month. You want to research the potential starting salary for your intended career. Again, this is some of that forward thinking. Even if your child's not sure exactly like right now what career they ultimately want to go into, what field are they interested in? What are some of the starting salaries in that intended career field? And then if you're considering graduate school, and how might you pay for graduate school? I will tell you, there are different ways to go about graduate school. So if your child wants to, maybe they want to work in admissions at the college, and then they can go to their graduate school for free. So there are different ways that you can be creative around pursuing graduate school if that's something that your child is intending on doing. Know your credit score, and if you plan to borrow a private loan. So this is important for families. If you are already thinking right now, like we've kind of mapped this out, we are at an okay place financially, and we intend to take out a private loan in addition to whatever financial aid we're offered by a college, that's great, but you want to do some work ahead of time and know your credit score. And then lastly, compare each school's net price after financial aid offers are received. So you want to go in, look at all of those different financial aid offers again, and think in terms of not just this first year, but actually degree completion and ultimately like what the career goal is if you need additional schooling. Next slide, please. Paying for college in Mass. So you have options. In Massachusetts, we have the Mass Transfer Program. So as an important kitchen table conversation, Is going to a community college a great way to save money? Yes. In Massachusetts, we have mass transfer. So if you start out at a community college, you can transfer to one of our four-year public colleges, and it's a great way to make college more affordable. Benefits include guaranteed credit transfer, tuition credit, and a freeze on tuition, which I will tell you, tuition fees go up every single year. So it's great to have that option through the mass transfer program. Tuition break is also a thing. So it's a reduction on out-of-state tuition costs at New England schools for certain programs. So I will tell you, let's say your child is interested in something very specific, maybe like marine biology or something, and you can't find it at any of the Massachusetts state schools. You can go to one of the out-of-state New England schools and get a tuition reduction. So there are some great ways to help pay for college if you want to look at some of the more creative options. Next slide, please. So free resources. So there are national and community resources. So FAFSA Day, Massachusetts, there's free assistance for completing the FAFSA. There are events, various events that are held October through February, and they're offered in both English and Spanish. So you can register at fafsaday.org. And I can't stress this enough. That's a really great resource, especially as you're filling out the FAFSA. If you have any questions, it's a great place to go first. Mass EdCo is also a really great resource. So there's educational opportunity centers. They offer free financial aid help. So you can go to massedco.org for resources and help with that. So staying on track through your senior year. So in the spring and summer of junior year, it's important to research colleges, visit campuses and college tours, ask teachers for letters of recommendation, take the SAT and or the ACT, and start writing the college essay. We're right now smack dab in the middle of fall of our senior year. So many of my students just retook their SAT. You want to make sure that you secure those letters of recommendation, finalize your college essay, have someone else read it. Getting an extra set of eyes on the essay is always a plus. Attend MEFA's college financing webinar, which check, you've just done that, and complete all admissions applications. And you want to submit your financial aid applications. Again, be mindful of those financial aid deadlines. Yes, there are admissions application deadlines, but especially if you're applying early action or early decision, you might have some early financial aid deadlines as well. And that will apply for both the FAFSA and the CSS Profile. In winter, you want to continue submitting your admissions applications, submit any remaining financial aid applications, but I will tell you, it doesn't hurt to submit your financial aid applications early, get your FAFSA done early so you don't have to worry about it later. And you want to apply for as many scholarships as you can. There is no penalty when it comes to scholarships, so I always tell students to maximize that amount of free money that you can potentially get by applying for tons of scholarships. And then your counselors will send in mid-year grade reports. Spring of your senior year, you'll receive those admissions and financial aid offers. You want to review those. So MEFA offers an after the college acceptance webinar, which is really great. And there's tons of great information and resources in that webinar around how to navigate some of those financial aid offers, how to make some appeals, ask for more money, how to review some of those awards. So that's a great resource. You want to attend college open houses. I know right now it's challenging because of COVID, but as much as you can, get physically on your college's campus, check it out, make sure you're making the best decision for you and your family. And then you, of course, choose your college by May 1st, which is National College Decision Day. So MEFA has additional resources around the senior year timeline right on the link there on the slide. Next slide, please. So what you can do now, if you haven't started FAFSA yet, you can start by getting an FSA ID created for both the student and the parent. That's the first step in the FAFSA process. You want to research deadlines and required applications. Again, if you're applying early action or early decision, you want to know what your admissions and financial aid deadlines are. Register for other webinars that MEFA has, mefa.org/events, and read financial aid blog posts on MEFA, mefa.org/blog, and reference MEFA's timeline for college admissions and financial aid on mefa.org. There are tons of resources out here. I know when this PowerPoint gets sent out, please revisit all of the links in here. There's tons of resources out there to help you navigate this process. And then lastly, of course, connect with MEFA on social media for additional information.
Okay, thank you very much. I think hopefully you can see the last slide with our phone number and email address. So thank you so much for helping us out tonight and answering so many great questions. I do have a few more questions that we can answer. But before we go, for those who are still on the line, we will be sharing the recording of tonight's webinar with everybody. And we will be sending copies of the PowerPoint slides to you. So if you're looking for a website that we listed here, I know we have a few folks who wanted me to provide different websites. They'll all be on the slides that you receive via email. So let me just take a quick, we'll answer a couple more questions. We're at 7:30, so I know folks probably are either trying to get to dinner or finishing up, but let me just see here. I know we had a couple questions related to the FAFSA and Merit Aid. So do you need to fill out the FAFSA to be eligible for Merit Aid?
No, you do not, but I will tell you, fill out the FAFSA when in doubt. There are many families who think, I'm not going to get anything from FAFSA, so why fill it out? I will tell you, when in doubt, fill out the FAFSA. You have absolutely nothing to lose from it. You don't have to take out that federal student loan if you don't want to, but you should absolutely complete the FAFSA.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Let me see here. There's a couple that I'll answer separately. One question about SATs, are they still required with COVID? And I can just answer that a lot of schools have gone test optional or not requiring the SAT test. So SAT scores. So it really is going to depend on the school, whether they require the SAT. You have to check with each school's admissions office to find out more about what their admissions requirements are. And another good question, if you want to answer this one for us, you can. Do both parents need an FAFSA ID if they're married and living together, or can one parent complete it with just that ID?
So only one parent will need to create the FSA ID. And let me just underscore this. When you create your FSA ID, put it in a safe place. Maybe you keep notes in your phone, write it down on a piece of paper, keep it with your tax return because you'll need that FSA ID every year. But only one parent, if you're married or living together, only one parent will need to create that FSA ID.
Excellent. And here's another good one that it's more of an admissions question, but it does impact financial aid greatly. And let me know if you feel comfortable with this one. So if a student is applying for early decision, but the financial aid package is not good or it's not affordable for the family, can they turn down that admission and go to a different college? Now this is for early decision, not early action.
Sure. So early decision is binding. So I always tell my students, when you are looking to apply to a college under early decision, you should really do your research, check out the net price calculator for the college, because the idea behind early decision is I'm applying here. If I'm accepted, that is absolutely where I am going. Now, I will tell you, there have been instances where just financially it wasn't doable, and I've had some families who were able to get out of it, but early decision is binding. So when you're going about this process, that is, you should do your homework before you move forward with it, because the intention behind it is you're accepted based off the idea that you will be definitely enrolling come the fall.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very important. If they're not 100% sure and you don't know that you can afford it without financial aid, then early decision's probably not a good option in that situation. Just go with regular admission or early action if it's an option. So we have just a lot of comments thanking us. This is very helpful. So thank you very much for joining us tonight and being our guest presenter. Just a reminder, we will share the recording as well as the copies of the PowerPoint slides. I know we got to most questions, but if we didn't get your question answered, please feel free to give us a call. Our email is right here on the screen, and we'd be happy to help you. We have a lot of folks like myself at MEFA who are able to answer your questions, and we're happy to do so. That's what we do. That's what we're here for. So thank you to our guest presenter all the way out in Springfield. We really appreciate you coming tonight, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to end the webinar and stop the recording. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us, and have a great evening, everybody. Thank you so much.